I guess that kind of answers my question. My next question was, how did adults dress? I mean,
How did what?
how did adults dress?
Oh, the girls. Well,
The
the girls
adults.
dressed essentially the same as the boys because
Well,
it was always cold, and in the summertime, when it was warm, girls wore what they used to call sundresses. Do you know what a sundress is?
Yep.
Sundress is a little dress girls wore without any arms and came down, almost to their knees. And I don't think they had any buttons or zippers or anything. They just pulled them on and pulled it off,
Mm-hmm.
And they wore slacks and shorts. Everybody lived in shorts in the summertime. And most of us went without any shoes or anything on our feet.
Oh.
Oh, Lord, we went bare feet. We went bicycling on our bare feet, and we went swimming. We never wore shoes. We had bare feet.
Oh.
Yeah, like you do out to camp sometimes.
Yeah.
And that used to be fun, but we were swimmers, and we could swim. I could swim like the wind in those days as a young boy.
Mm.
Oh, man, I could swim like the wind.
Oh.
And I love to do it,
Yeah.
How are we coming? Are you making any sense of all of this, Caroline?
Yeah, I am. So did the adults dress pretty much the same as the kids?
Well, yeah, I don't know of any adults in my day that ever wore shorts in the summer or any loose-fitting clothing or anything like that. The adults men wore, long pants and work shirts. Sometimes they'd roll up the sleeves up beyond their elbow. And I don't think I ever saw my father without his shirt on. With just a T-shirt or an undershirt or something like that. He always had a shirt. And the ladies, the women, always wore dresses. And they would wear slacks and a jacket. And in the evening, they would wear a sweater if it was a little cool. And they used to have, the women used to wear what was commonly referred to as a house dress.
Yeah.
House dress was a nice little dress that it wasn't a dress-up dress with a lot of lace and embroidery and stuff on it, but it was a very nice, washed and ironed, maybe starched cotton dress. It was kind of loose-fitting in the summer, so it wasn't too hot and so forth. And I can remember my mother very well. If she was busy all day cleaning the house or working or doing a lot of cooking, wearing an apron and that sort of thing, late in the afternoon, around 4 o'clock or so, she would get washed up. And, of course, there were no showers in those days. You just couldn't go in and take a shower. But she would get washed up and so-called cleaned up, and she would put on a nice clean dress. And get ready to get dinner, to get supper for my father and my sister and I. And Alice's mother, Grammy's mother, she used to do that. She'd work all day, and she'd have an apron on. Ladies always wore aprons all the time because they were always cooking. They were doing their clothes washing. They were scrubbing floors and cleaning the house, doing all kinds of things every day.
Oh.
And they always had an apron on, and late afternoon they'd take the apron off and hang it up and get cleaned up, so to speak, put on a nice house dress. And but that's how the adults lived. But they didn't wear shorts. The ladies never ever wore shorts in those days or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
That enough on that one?
Yeah, that's perfect. Let's see. What were some really popular fads?
Was the most popular what?
Fad. F-A-D.
Oh, the most popular fad. Oh, gee.
Or if you had to name like a few, not just one.
Well, the most popular fad. Well, there was, I don't know. There was a saying back way back at about the time of the war years, back in the 1940s, when there was a famous saying that said Kilroy was here.
Mm-hmm.
And American soldiers, when they went all over Europe during the fighting of Europe in those days, in the war, when they'd go somewhere, they would write on a fence or something, Kilroy was here.
Who was Kilroy?
Well, Kilroy, that was a fictitious, you've heard of like Humpty Dumpty set on the wall?
Yeah.
Remember Humpty Dumpty, the big egg, and so forth? Well, Kilroy was a man, he had a long nose, looked something like one of the Simpsons in the cartoon character.
Oh.
You know about the Simpsons?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you know the Simpsons. Well, this Kilroy looked something like one of the Simpsons, and he was called Kilroy.
Oh.
And somebody would just draw a line, and they'd put Kilroy sitting on a fence, and in spray paint or a crayon or something, they'd write Kilroy was here. And that was Kilroy.
Oh.
Kilroy was here. And that was kind of a joke, kind of around the country and around in Europe and so forth.
Okay.
But the fad, I don't know what I could think of was a good fad at the time. I really don't. If I do, I'll keep that in mind, try to think of one.
Okay. Next question. Were there, like, the older generations at the time, did they think, like, what did they think of the younger people, like, the younger people and their styles?
Oh, gee, Caroline, the older people, they were just crazy in love with the younger people.
Really?
It was a whole different era than it is today. And the young people were very, very much enamored with the older people.
Oh.
Grandmothers and grandfathers and aunts and uncles were looked at with great respect. And they thought they were just wonderful. And grandmothers and grandfathers and aunts and uncles thought the children were, just beautiful. And they all tried to behave and use their best manners when they were together. And, it was a wonderful time. It wasn't like it is today when youngsters look with disdain on some of their relatives or older people, or they were insulting. And, it was absolutely not called for if you went into somebody's house with a cap on and didn't take your cap off.
Oh.
To go to somebody's table, to go to Grammy and Grampy's table with Brendan with a cap on,
Mm-hmm.
Would almost be asked to leave,
Oh, yeah.
But it never happened because they knew better. They just didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remark now about a friend up at Forest City. Who's a friend of mine, and you know him. You're Dale Wheaton at Wheaton's Lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Dale Wheaton?
Yeah, of course.
Came up to Forest City once with Dale Wheaton.
Yeah.
He picked you up in Bangor and brought you up. Dale Wheaton comes into my house. He always wears a cap.
Oh.
And when Dale Wheaton comes into our house, the minute he opens the door and steps in, off comes his cap.
Wow, that's nice.
Off comes his cap. And it's very noticeable. And I have mentioned it to him. And I have mentioned it many times, as Grammy will attest.
Oh.
As an example. Because few people do it anymore. Few people do it anymore. You know Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
And Jane's husband, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good guy, and I like him a lot. But he once sat at our dining room table for dinner. Grammy made a nice dinner, and he sat there with his baseball cap on.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, this is a few years ago, and I asked him if he'd please take off his hat while he sat at my table.
What did he say?
He didn't say anything. He felt like 2 cents.
Oh.
Took off his cap, put it under his chair. When I was growing up, that was sinful. Nobody did it.
Oh.
Never had a chance to speak to somebody because when they came into the room, they took off their hat, loving pride on the offspring, on the children.
Okay.
growing up, and they were polite, courteous, and man, when we came to the table, we were washed up. There was never an argument. Okay, Caroline, you get to go wash up now. You wash up and comb your hair and get ready for supper. It was just automatic.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. What were the most popular toys that children wanted?
Well, my sister and girls in those days loved the dolls, of course. And it came to pass that the dolls came out one year with their eyes open, and when you laid the doll down in the crib to put the doll to bed or the baby to bed, the eyes would close.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
engineered so that when you were holding the little doll, the eyes were wide open.
Yeah, I
When you
know
put
what you
the
mean.
doll down, the eyes would close. And I can remember that was a big thing. My sister had a number of dolls. She had a name for them and clothes for them and that sort of thing, and dressed them and everything. And the boys had things like books. We all loved books. Books about cowboys and winning the West and boxing and so forth and so on. And they had a book called Big Little Book, a little small book. Everybody had those big.
What were the really popular hairstyles for boys and girls?
Popular hairstyles for boys and girls.
Yeah.
Well, girls had quite long hair. Girls had long hair. My sister Joan, Aunt Joan, had long hair. And boys had regular haircuts. And sometimes they had what they called butch cuts. But in those days, it was kind of called a pompadour.
Huh.
You know what pompadour was?
Yep.
Pompadour was like a butch cut, but it's just cut. Well, Brendan had, I think, a butch cut, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
But the pompadour, it had the hair and the front and hair on top of your head and everything. It stuck about straight up. It was about 2 inches long, and it stuck straight up, you know?
Yeah.
So that was popular, and then there was a regular haircut. I always had just a regular haircut. And of course, we didn't have barbershops or anything like that in my day, Caroline, and our parents, my father would cut our hair. He had a pair of handheld clippers that he'd clip your hair with, and then scissors and a comb and so forth, and he could do a pretty darn good job.
Oh.
And my mother would cut my sister Joan's hair for her, so forth.
Girls had pigtails.
And girls had pigtails, Grammy said. A lot of pigtails. You know what pigtails are?
Yeah, of course.
Did you ever have pigtails?
Yeah, I did. A lot.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, Grammy's right. Girls had pigtails a lot. And my sister Joan used to have some kind of a hairdo where she would wear a band around her head.
Like a headband?
Around her forehead and around the top of her head, behind her ears. And I can remember that very well.
Okay. Actually, okay, so that already pretty much, you already gave me an answer for the next question, pretty much.